Hey guys, Dr. Justin Marcagiani here. Today we're going to be talking about the top 3 ways to naturally treat your thyroid. And by treat, we're talking about support the underlying reasons why it's not functioning optimally. We're not talking about a pharmaceutical, a drug approach here. We're talking about supporting the underlying stressors of why your thyroid is dysfunctioning in the first place. All right, before we dive in, make sure you subscribe, hit that like and thumbs up button. Love to see your comments down below. All right, so put a couple of put your thyroid in a couple different camps here, so it's really clear where you fall in. There's a lot of people that have chronic high levels of TSH, let's say above 4.5, 5. These are people that are probably going to need to be on some level of thyroid hormone support, whether it's pharmaceutical or whether it's a natural desiccated pharmaceutical grade. You may need some thyroid replacement depending on how high that TSH is and how chronically high it is, because we do want to make sure that TSH is chronically high. It's yelling at that thyroid to make thyroid hormone. And if we have, let's say, TSH chronically high, then we're probably going to need to bring that TSH down, and there's a feedback loop. And so as we provide some thyroid hormone support, that takes that TSH down, because it's like yelling at your kids. As soon as your kids start responding, you can start lowering the volume of your voice. As soon as the thyroid starts responding, hormones go up, that TSH over here comes down. So we want to look at it holistically. Is that fixing the root underlying issue? Let's go into depth on that. Most thyroid issues have an autoimmune component where the thyroid's been destroyed for years and years and years. Most people, when their TSH starts to go high, it's because there's an autoimmune attack, and it's probably been going on for like better part of a decade. And so it didn't just happen overnight. This has taken a long time to get to this point. And so when that TSH is creeping up, almost always the downstream hormones are low. So if you bring that up, it should do a little seesaw action and level out. Now, most people, they don't ever look at downstream hormones. So of course, we want to run, as functional medicine doctors, we want to run a comprehensive downstream hormone panel. We want to look at TSH. If it's your first time, maybe T4 free and total, right? Only 2% of your thyroid hormone is in a free fraction. The other 95 to 98% is protein bound. So looking at free gives you that 2 to 5%, and then the total gives you the whole window. So one gives you a window to what's functionally bioavailable with the free. The other one gives you a window into what's glandular output looks like. So we look at T4 free and total, T3 free and total. And again, T3 is going to be more metabolically active than T4. Most people only look at T4, if they even look at anything. Most of the time it's just TSH. So looking at T3 is really important, because you'll find most people will have TSH levels that may be a little off or even normal. T4 looks good, but then you have this big T3 conversion issue. So if you look at the reference range, if here's the reference range, this is the top end, this is the bottom end, people will be T4 right in the middle, and then T3 comes in, it's at the very bottom end of the range. And so it's really important to look at T4 free and total as well as T3 free and total and see where it sits in the reference range, because most will have this step down from T4 to T3, and that's going to be a conversion issue. Now, the problem with conventional medications, they're typically going to be a tetraiodothyronine, a T4 molecule, and they bind a sodium there to make it a pharmaceutical drug so they can patent it. And so they typically only give T4. And so that involves your body making that conversion, and a lot of times that may not happen. Not to mention that T4 will feed back to the brain and bring that TSH down, but you could still have hormonal issues downstream. You could still have low thyroid symptoms, cold hands, cold feet, hair loss, eyebrow thinning, bowel issues, motility issues, constipation, anxiety, depression. You could still have issues and still have a pretty TSH. And so this is where conventional medicine, I think, has lost a lot of people, jump the shark, is they just make sure that TSH is good and they don't look at downstage indications. Now, why did that TSH go off to begin with? Like I mentioned earlier, most people with thyroid issues, there's an autoimmune component at the root. So your immune system is actually attacking your thyroid gland. And so over time, that thyroid gland loses functional tissue in its ability to produce thyroid and synthesize thyroid hormone. Therefore, over time, that hormone is dropping off because of that autoimmune inflammatory attack. So some people may have to be on some level of thyroid hormone moving forward because that tissue is functionally not the same as it was 10 years ago. Some people can come in there depending on how high your antibodies are. This is why it's important when we run that test to look at TPO antibody and thyroglobulin antibody too. We want to look at both so we can see how that autoimmune attack is. Conventional medicine totally ignores it because again, they're not going to do anything to treat those antibodies, because how conventional medicine treats any autoimmune issues with medications that have a lot of side effects, whether it's immunosuppressants or steroids. And so they tend to not use those medications for thyroid patients because the side effects are worse for the drugs most of the time than they are for just leaving it alone. And so we want to actually get to the root underlying issue, because the data is pretty clear on what those root underlying issues are, and they exist outside of the purview of conventional medicine. They exist in the realm of diet and nutrients and other subclinical findings that conventional medicine ignores. We know autoimmune issues can be exacerbated by low vitamin D. We know gluten exposure can be a big deal. Type in gluten and Hashimoto's, there's a lot of connection with that out of the gates. Vitamin D, low glutathione, low selenium. Other nutrients like zinc and magnesium and CoQ10 all play very important roles. Even infections, dysbiosis or imbalance in the microbiome plays a big role. Certain bacteria can really impact the immune system and can increase gut permeability. And that gut permeability can throw off the immune system and exacerbate autoimmune attacks. So it's important to look at everything holistically. So first thing is, top 3 ways. First thing is, if your TSH is high, you may need to add in thyroid hormone. Again, you have your conventional Synthroid, levothyroxine, Levoxyl, right? These are going to be your conventional medications. And then you have your NDTs, your natural desiccated thyroid glandulars. You can have your Armor, your MP thyroid. On this camp, you can have your WP or Nature-Throid. Some of those have been recalled for a period of time due to dosing issues. But again, depending on when you watch this video, they may be back in stock. And then others have other natural desiccated glandulars that are kind of over the counter, if you will. I have one called Thyroid Balance that we get the porcine tissue from Australia. It works wonderful. But either way, you want to be testing to make sure that that TSH is coming down, getting closer to 1. That's a good range to be at, usually 0.5 or 2.5. You don't want to make your treatment all about TSH. That's a mistake conventional medicine makes. They bring their TSH down, but then how do the downstream hormones look? How does the person feel? How does their basal body temperature look? All their other functional symptoms, are they better? Are they improving? Hair loss, cold hands, cold feet, motility, mood, brain fog. You got to look at the whole person. You can't just rely on making that TSH pretty. How does everything else look downstream? So we look at using a natural desiccated thyroid glandular, or if you have to, you can do a levothyroxine, but you have to make sure that T4 to T3 conversion is happening. I see many times in patients, they do not convert well. And then you also got to be aware of sometimes with the levothyroxine or the Synthroid, there are some additives to it, some of the corn protein in there that could potentially be an exacerbator for autoimmune patients. So I recommend, if you do good on Synthroid, be better off going to a Tyrosine or Tyrosine SOL, which is going to be a liquid version or a hypo, very, very clean version of T4 that doesn't have any of the extra additives. And sometimes it'll be liquid as well. And so if you do well with T4, you're much better off doing a Tyrosine that's going to be more hypo, very low allergenicity. So like that out of the gate. So you may need glandular support. You may need to really work on the big factors and why that T4 to T3 is not converting. Again, that could be selenium, zinc. There could be cortisol issues, insulin resistance issues, microbiome issues, gut infections like H. pylori or Blastocystis hominis, low glutathione, low vitamin D. Again, this is where working with a good functional medicine doctor is going to help rule these things out and make sure you're dialed in. Also, blood sugar perturbations and swings can be a big thing. So, there's a lot of potential factors. So you have to weigh that into what is happening and work with someone to kind of get that customized in. But you need nutrients to make that conversion. Iodine can also be a big deal too. Now, iodine's a double-edged sword. In my book coming out, The Thyroid Reboot, we talk about it. Iodine can be an exacerbator of Hashimoto's, because when you increase iodination via iodine, that sodium iodine symporter brings iodine in. The iodination process spits out hydrogen peroxide, which can cause inflammation and cause B cell infiltration and increase autoimmune response. And so that could make the autoimmune attack worse. So I never recommend, if someone has elevated antibodies coming out of the gate, adding any level of iodine outside of a couple hundred micrograms. I would recommend using all the other cofactors like selenium, because selenium helps with thyroid metabolism. It helps take the hydrogen peroxide and turn it into water. It pulls off an oxygen. So H2O2 is hydrogen peroxide. You pull off an oxygen, what do? You get water. So selenium is really important for that iodination process and helping with hydrogen peroxide, thus decreasing antibodies, making sure other cofactors like zinc and CoQ10 and magnesium and copper are all there. Maybe even vitamin A, which isn't really good in cod liver oil or liver beef glandular. Vitamin A is very good for the thyroid receptor site. And then looking at cortisol, because cortisol and that HPA or HPT axis dysfunction can really drive thyroid communication and thyroid feedback. And so we may look at iodine. So here's a good site called My Food Data. We may make sure we get some food iodine in there. I would be very careful of anything on the high side here, like dried seaweed, that's at a gram level. But some fish, you get 100 micrograms, a little bit of potato, a little bit, some shrimp. I would be more on the paleo food side. So I'd be using foods that are going to be anti-inflammatory, low toxin, nutrient dense. So we wouldn't do fish sticks if it's breaded, but if it's fish or some turkey or some eggs or some tuna, you can definitely get a little bit of iodine there. A good multi will usually have 100 micrograms to 150. That's usually going to be okay. If someone's really flared up, even that may be too much, but out of the gate, it tends to be okay as long as someone's on a paleo to autoimmune paleo diet and you're getting some selenium and zinc in there. That can be a good kind of starting point out of the gate. And next, monitor the antibodies. Get to the underlying reason why that immune system is aggravated and is attacking that thyroid gland. So some of those nutrients may be addressed in factor 2, where we talked about the thyroid converting nutrients like vitamin D and glutathione and selenium. Some of those nutrients also piggyback and help with factor 3, which is why that autoimmune attack is happening. So some of those things may plug in there. We may want to look at the gut. We may want to look at mold or heavy metals. These can be other factors that can impact conversion, but also impact that autoimmune attack. So usually those factors that impact conversion may also impact the immune system. So it's really good to look at both and make sure everything is fully dialed in. So in general, you want to make sure your diet's right. So paleo to autoimmune paleo is essential. Really want to make sure nutrient dense, anti-inflammatory, good fats, good proteins at every meal. Keep the inflammatory, junky omega-6, trans fats, processed flours, grains, vegetable oils out. Make sure we are digesting and breaking down our food. I can't tell you how often I see people have poor digestion. They're not breaking down these nutrients. So enzymes and acids, maybe even bile support may be essential. Really making sure you're managing stress, diet, lifestyle. And then if you need to be on a thyroid hormone, you have your 3 camps. You have your conventional camp with a hypoallergenic add-on with the tyrosine. You have your USP, your pharmaceutical-based glandulars like Armour, NP, WP, Westroid, Nature-Throid. And then you have your over-the-counter kind of more NDT glandulars that are still can be really good if you're getting it from good sources. Again, either way, you have to be testing to make sure your TSH is not elevated. You don't want TSH elevated. That means you're whipping a tired horse and you can eventually develop a goiter because TSH is thyroid stimulating hormone. So it will stimulate that thyroid. And then got to look at the conversion aspect. And then we got to look at the autoimmune immune stimulation aspect. So I hope that makes sense out of the gates. If you guys have any questions, feel free to let me know. If you want to dive in, it feels a little overwhelming, there'll be a link down below. If you want to reach out to my staff and team, we're happy to help you out and look at your underlying thyroid factors. Look at the big 3 things that we talked about here. Really come up with a plan that gets to the underlying issue, why your thyroid's off, and make sure you're supported. Because your conventional MD may just say TSH looks good, maybe even T4 is okay. Hey, you're good, even though you have thyroid symptoms that say that things are off. You're good, right? But we want to look deeper, and the thyroid very rarely just dysfunctions by itself. There's other factors that are pushing it out of balance. So you really want to dig deeper and get to the root cause. All right, guys, if you enjoyed it, please let me know. Love to see your comments down below. Also, give me a share, a like, a thumbs up with friends and family. All right, y'all, have an awesome day. Take care.